Anxiety over President Donald Trump's trade war is at a boiling point after new developments this week. Tariffs on Canadian lumber were raised to 45%. New tariffs were added to furniture. Automaker Stellantis bailed on an investment in Canada, opting instead for the United States. And Trump doubled down on his tariff policy, saying it's important to national security. The result is a country on edge.
The industry is at a tipping point. There is no time to wait. Jobs and mills are on the line.
We're seeing jobs pillaged by this U.S. administration.
What are we going to stand up for in this trade war?
We're nice, play nice in the sandbox. If you can't get a deal, let's start hitting them back.
There's times to hit back and there's times to talk, and right now is the time to talk.
Well, right now is the time to talk with our party insiders. Greg McEachern is a former Liberal ministerial advisor. He's away this week, but he's here. And here with me in the studio, Fred Delory is a former Conservative campaign manager, and Melanie Richer is a former communications director for the NDP. Mel, let's start with you. This week feels like a low simmer, maybe turning into a bit of a rapid boil on some of these things. I mean, David Eby says softwood is being thrown under the bus to help auto. The auto sector feels they're being thrown under the bus for steel and aluminum. Doug Ford is saying hit back, and Mark Carney had to go have supper with the Premier yesterday to maybe calm things down. What's your read of where things are?
Right, well, I think we're now, not finally, I think people are now starting to feel the hurt. They're feeling the hurt from the U.S., be it massive job losses, being companies having to shut their doors, and industries needing more support. So I think now that it's a little bit less of a concept that this is coming and it's happening in real time. I think this is why you're seeing the premiers pushing back against the Prime Minister a little bit. I think the interesting difference to give Prime Minister Carney a little bit of credit is he seems to be going and meeting with folks and having the potentially difficult conversations, which is, I think, a good sign for the country. The softwood versus auto versus canola, that whole conversation this week I found quite interesting. I do also think, though, that the reason that we're seeing the premiers push back a little bit more is we're seeing public polling change a little bit. Folks are less patient because we haven't seen anything positive come out of the relationship with the U.S. yet. So I think a lot of what we're seeing with premiers is a response to that, is a response to how people are feeling on the ground, and people are not done waiting, but becoming less and less patient by the day. And I think that's what you're seeing in the Premier's response. Waiting for maybe more than just, now is the time to talk, but actually seeing something, I think, in the next little bit would be helpful.
Fred, the other thing they're frustrated with is they don't seem to know what is going on. I don't know if there's been a First Minister's briefing since the First Minister's meeting in Muskoka, in Deerhurst, when Doug Ford hosted them. And, Wab Kinew and others are like, what are we getting for the concessions? And you can see the frustration starting to build. It's not a good sign for the country.
It's very difficult for a Prime Minister to be negotiating with a President when you have all of these competing interests. Like when you're making a deal, that's a give and take. Some parts of our economy are going to be hurt by this. The Prime Minister, I think, is out there, and I think legitimately trying to get the best deal for the country. There's going to be some premiers that are going to be very, very upset when this is done. There's just no way around it. That's just how this is.
I don't know if any premier is going to be completely happy. It's like who's mad and who's really mad, because if you look at the stated goals of the president, it is to take and take and take.
Right. So this is an immense amount of work that the Prime Minister has in front of him to do. He is, to Melanie's point, like the fact that he is going out there. Premier Ford has had some very biting criticism this week, and the Prime Minister, for him to go and sit down with him right away, I think that's something we haven't seen in a long time in this country, someone actually being proactive in doing that. So kudos to him to do that. But again, expectations were set so high that he is the guy to get this done. He's got to get something done that will appeal to the most people.
Greg, it's interesting to see the language evolve a little bit from the Prime Minister saying that we can make it better. I know it's gotten torqued a little bit, but let's negotiate a win. It was interpreted in certain ways, during the election, and the realization is setting in that it seems to be an exercise in damage mitigation now in talks. What are your thoughts on where things are with the mood of the leadership of the country?
Well, Canada winning might be that Trump loses and he's just, slowly, or he's just going to ignore, the facts of, as Mel said, we're starting to feel the pain, but just do a scan of any, big city news like Las Vegas or any place that makes bourbon, any place that depends on tourism. There's lots of pain on the on the American side as well. It's just that the Democratic Party just seems to be incapable of making any headway or making any awareness of that. I always joke, that I'm, culturally 114 years old. I was looking for a better analogy than plate spinning when we were kids, people at circuses or on variety shows, like, I don't know what having 15 browsers open, but, we were supposed to have government by cabinet back, but the reality is, the Prime Minister is the man. And as Fred said, it's good that he went to see Doug Ford right away, but the fact that he had to is a bit telling. And so to me, maybe it's time to do another meeting with the premiers. Doug Ford said something recently that, if I was working for the Prime Minister, I'd find it a bit troubling. Maybe the Prime Minister knows something that I don't.
Yeah.
And that is something that you really don't want. You want everybody on side for as long as possible. And again, it has been a good run. Most of the premiers have been on side for a very, very long time. But even Premier Holt in New Brunswick recently wrote the Prime Minister. There's big, that is a lumber province as well.
Yeah, they're all feeling it from their industries, their mayors, their constituents, and their backbenches, right? The premiers are getting their own pressure down there.
Absolutely. And there's something about Doug Ford here. He has been the bad cop the whole time, which can be a very useful thing. He was the guy in March that said he was prepared to shut off the power to the United States. That got a lot of attention. There's a really interesting cover story on Doug Ford from June from Toronto Life. And they talk about when they went to DC and they were working with our ambassador, but they gamed it out. They thought that they could have a 5-minute meeting and it would just say, hey, nice that you arrived, but get the F out of here. Or, we get a solution on this.
Right.
So I think, there could be better coordination with, Carney is good cop, Premier Ford is bad cop. But the communication on this is, and we've said this for a couple of weeks now,
right,
leaves a lot to be desired.
But Mel, the fact that there isn't anything being said publicly, and the fact that with a budget less than a month away, Michael Sabia is in Washington, D.C., the clerk of the Privy Council, and Dominic LeBlanc, and very low profile, there must be something moving in the talks, right? So they don't want to, if you're talking in private and it's not spilling out, that's usually a good sign. And you can see why the Prime Minister wouldn't want to say something publicly, have it leak out, and cause problems with Trump, because that is the risk here. But, to Greg's point, there is economic pain in the United States. The political pain for the president is not there, because he's got a compliant Senate and a compliant Congress. Everything's shut down on there, and he's just coasting along. But that's not the case here in Canada for the Prime Minister, right? That's the risk here for this country.
And even though, some of those sectors in the U.S. are feeling the pain, I don't think the president cares, right? So how can you have those conversations when you've got somebody who just doesn't seem to be moved by anything reasonable, quote unquote. The interesting thing about the Prime Minister and having those conversations behind closed doors, or those conversations moving ahead, rule number one in communications is you can still talk about process. You can still talk about what is happening, what conversations are being had, what it is that we are focused on without putting everything out on the table, right? You can give value statements to people, you can let people know what's happening, and you can definitely you should be able to at least let the premiers know what's happening so that they have a little bit more information when they're being asked those questions. Because Greg raised a good point about what Premier Ford said of, maybe the Prime Minister knows something that I don't know. That is not something you want your premiers to be saying, even if, you play good cop, bad cop. Premier Canoe was pretty hard on the Prime Minister last week and this week as well. So you're getting it from folks across the province of what is the plan? And if you can't give us what the plan is, how can we continue to tell the people that we represent that there is a plan? So I do think you're probably right. I'm hoping that you're right, that those things continue behind the scenes, but there's probably a little bit more that can be said to people without giving away the details, without giving away all the things that are on the bargaining table, whatnot, so that people feel a little bit more reassured that this is happening and that these conversations continue and they're continuing in a positive way.
Yeah, your point, Fred, you talk a lot about narrative. Mel was just talking about comms. You can talk about process, you can do value statements. That doesn't seem to be how these guys operate, though, right? Like, I know they've had issues staffing up and different things. So I don't want to make it about human resources, but it's even on, the disclosure of a conversation with a world leader. It seems as if it's almost like a corporate communications approach that they will do it when it's of a material value that needs to be shared with us shareholders, so to speak, and that's why it seems to be held so tight.
Yeah, they have a very different comms approach than what we're used to seeing, in that they sometimes don't have a comms approach.
100%.
They're very much focused on the actual work, the policy, and I assume that's what's happening right now, is that they're head down on that, and they haven't figured out the strategy and how to actually tell that story. And we saw this for the last while with Carney, going back to the election, the last 10 days of the campaign. I bring it up often, how they basically stopped telling their own story. They should have got a majority last election, and they failed to do it, and they haven't figured it out, that you still need to talk to people.
Totally.
You need to tell people what you're doing and why you're doing it and what the outcome could be.
Yeah,
so what would you
do anymore? You're Prime Minister.
Well, yes, exactly. A CEO can say the decision is made, the conversation is over, and you can't do that in politics. But just quickly, Fred, what would you think they should be doing? Like Mel was talking about reaching out to the premiers, talking a bit about process and where it's going. What would you think is the right
The premiers
approach?
are the most agitated bunch in Canada right now that are out publicly speaking, and they have big megaphones. They represent the entire country. So having them in some way, knowing, and to Melanie's point, it's a good point about process, tell them what you're doing, how you're doing it, and how we are looking to get there. Don't give specific dates. Things will leak out. And we know it's very hard to have dates in this type of
and they get weaponized against you, right?
And they do. So you've got to be
right?
cautious with it. But it is an opportunity to tell a story to your team. You built this team in terms of bringing all the premiers together. And the relationship has been very solid and has been holding for the most part.
Yeah, but the tariffs from the U.S. and China, they hit the pressure points in the economy and the fault lines of federalism, and you've seen it all bubble up this week. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre is getting some heat this week after making comments in a podcast about the Trudeau government and the National Police Force, the RCMP.
Many of the scandals of the Trudeau era should have been involved jail time. I mean, Trudeau broke the criminal code when he took a free vacation from someone with whom he had government business. It's just like, it's right there in the criminal code. If the RCMP had been doing its job and not covering up for him, then he would have been criminally charged. And again, he probably violated the criminal code in the SNC-Lavalin scandal. These would normally have led to criminal charges, but of course the RCMP covered it all up, and the leadership at the RCMP is just frankly just despicable when it comes to enforcing laws against the Liberal government.
So Poilievre was asked yesterday if those comments were appropriate, and he responded yes, and then said this.
Justin Trudeau violated Section 121 of the Criminal Code when he accepted a $250,000 vacation from someone who had asked for him to give a $10 million government grant. The RCMP's own documents revealed that there were grounds to believe that fraud had happened. And yet, even though he broke the criminal code, the Mounties, the brass of the RCMP said that they could not, quote, productively pursue an investigation. If the RCMP commissioner is now saying that he wants to open that investigation, we're prepared to hand over all the evidence of Mr. Trudeau's criminal code violations.
Okay, let's bring back the party insiders, Fred Delory, Greg McEachern, and Melanie Richer. Greg, what do you make of this move and the doubling down by the leader of the Conservatives?
So I've talked a lot about 2024 and how the Conservative leader seems to be fixated on that. What's the line about rearview mirrors? Objects may seem closer than they are. So now we've moved back to 2019 and before.
17.
And there's also a little bit of an obsession here with Justin Trudeau. The famous line about his father in the book that Christina McCall wrote was, "He haunts us still." Well, Justin Trudeau still haunts Pierre Poilievre. And look, I'm coming to you from Nova Scotia, where there was a massacre during the pandemic. And there's a report on that massacre, and there's a lot of things that the RCMP could have done a lot better. But they're not talking about improving that aspect of the RCMP. He's talking about getting them to do what he wants for his own political gain. And that is hugely problematic. They're also talking about 2019 and his House leader, Andrew Scheer, who ran in an election that year, lost. So they're not just litigating the election of 2025 and sounding butthurt about it. They're back to one from 2019. And we had an election in 2021 since then. And what usually happens if you've got a majority government, history in Canada shows that you get elected to another one. Justin Trudeau did not. A lot of things happened in 2019. He lost his principal secretary over this. He was reduced partly because of this to a minority government. Why are we still talking about it? The Conservatives after the election were pointing to all their successes, and one of the areas of success was they elected, I think, 20 new MPs. But if you were watching TV this week, you saw Andrew Scheer talking about things from 2019. So I cannot, for the life of me, understand this. And I just keep coming back to the leadership review in January. This is what this is about? Because you're speaking to the base of the party.
Right.
Are they worried, or do they just want to run the board, with what should be a really safe leadership review? It's being held in Alberta. It's being held in January. Why are they talking about this? They're not talking about pocketbook issues like we heard. Why did the PCs win in Newfoundland and Labrador is pocketbook issues. These aren't pocketbook issues. These are old grievances, and they're getting older by the day.
So, Fred, just to bring you in here, because there was some attempt saying oh, Brenda Lucki did this and Brenda Lucki did that, but these comments were in the present tense about the RCMP. It's a continuation. Like there was ongoing crimes. And look, Justin Trudeau him and his government were found to have acted improperly with the Aga convocation by the Ethics Commissioner and in the whole SNC-Lavalin thing. But even Jody Wilson-Raybould said it was inappropriate but not illegal based on everything she's seen. Despicable, cover-up, Justin Trudeau should be in jail. Why? What does that get you?
It gets you nothing. It gets you nowhere. There's no point to be saying this, other than I will take a bit of issue with what Greg said. It's fine to go after previous Liberal governments if you have issue with them and you want to go and hammer on it if you think it's helpful.
Well, the bail issue is a good example.
After the RCMP and saying what he said is over the top and unnecessary. As Conservatives, we are supposed to be the party that protects institutions and bolsters them and builds them up. Supposed to be. That is not the case here. It is what he said was quite egregious, and he's going to pay a price for this in some way. There's people that are looking at this across the board. He's the leader of the opposition, dominating media in the last few days, not in a good way. That's not a good thing. Yes, he has a leadership review, and a lot of the people in the party who support him may look at this and be nodding along, but there's going to be some people who are thinking, what in the heck are we doing here? How are we preparing to defeat the Liberals in the next election? If we're talking about this sort of thing and running down the RCMP the way we are, that is not how you win elections in this country.
Mel, I just wonder your thoughts of this are. I mean, because the administration of justice, faith in national policing, faith in criminal investigations. When the RCMP says this is a crime, we need to charge them, you should believe it. And when they say there isn't, you should also believe that too, right? In an ideal world, what do you think this does to that whole dynamic?
I kind of have three thoughts when I hear him talk like that. The first one is really dangerous and rhetoric divisive, right? Your point in doing this is to pit people against each other. And what's weird about it is we saw police associations across the country line up with Pierre Poilievre in the last election. So to hear him disparage RCMP officers is I find strange. And the institution that we should be very careful to not bias in any way, I find that strange. The second is desperate. It feels desperate, and desperate in you've got a leadership coming up and you are literally trying everything that Canadians rejected in the last election to shore up your base going into that leadership. With this, with the Freedom Convoy stuff, with all sorts of stuff, with the DEI stuff over Thanksgiving weekend, like this just seems like you're just throwing everything you can at the wall to shore up folks. And the third thing that it makes me think of is you're kind of out to lunch. Prime Minister's gone. This was something that happened in 2017. Why are we still talking about it? There's been how many elections since then? 3. Canadians decided in every single one of those elections that they didn't care, that they were still going to vote for the Liberals. So it just seems like, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know why you're talking about it. And you must really be trying every single thing to work because nothing's working for you right now is my kind of thoughts on that.
You want to jump in?
Which is interesting. He is everywhere. Like he's doing, it was, what's it called?
Not in a good way.
Northern Perspectives was the podcast and YouTube channel.
Never heard of it before, watched it.
But there's a lot of things in the YouTube space,
there's so much. And there's a lot of good stuff out there too that we just don't see. But he also went on CBC The House numerous times, right? Like he is trying to go everywhere and tell different types of messages to different groups.
Conflicting.
He speaks conflicting and he speaks in a different tone to them. that's going to catch up with, this caught up with them. I don't think they expected this to be seen by, we're talking about it on CBC right now.
The invincibility and the invulnerability that kind of shielded them from a lot of things until this election, it isn't there now, right? And I think that has changed sort of the media ecosystem in the country on this. And look, when a friend of mine saw that clip, they texted a group chat and said, is this AI? Because they didn't believe it was real. And it was just also, we're seeing now reaction to that from a former senior aide to Stephen Harper, former executive director of the Conservative Party, has written an op-ed in the Toronto Star about Pierre Poilievre, and it is not kind. The headline is Pierre Poilievre is dismantling the principled, trustworthy Conservative Party. And this was written by Dimitri Soudis, who is Stephen Harper's communications director. He writes, in a rule of law democracy, no opposition leader should ever call for a prime minister or any political rival to be jailed. He called that rhetoric reckless and said Canadians are, quote, tired of the anger, the mockery, the volume. They need calm, confidence, and answers. And Greg, the other thing that I thought was interesting from what Dimitri wrote is he said, months after losing the federal election, Poilievre seems not to have learned the lessons of his electoral defeat. I mean, what does it say to you that someone like Dimitri Soudis, who was right there in the Harper PMO, is coming out with a shot like this?
It's incredibly significant. But, I mean, I want to be fair to my fellow panelists. What Fred just said, sometimes the three of us, whether we're post-partisan or not, the truth hurts, but you're not going to get the party that you support to go in the right direction if you plug your nose and say everything's okay all the time. And, what Fred said today, what Dimitri Soudis has in the Toronto Star, and I've had other Conservatives that have sent me messages as well going, they do not understand this. There just seems to be this huge grievance factor, along with the fact that they cannot get over that they lost the election, and they're not going to talk about why they lost the election. They're going to talk about other reasons. Somehow Carney fooled everyone. It's not helping them move. And you can argue about the polls party to party. Like it's never good when you're in government, minority government, especially in the House is sitting. But if you look at the top line numbers between Carney and Poilievre, it is not helping him. I think people got to know who they think Pierre Poilievre was, and that didn't help him. And he's not helping himself.
Well, there was a dynamic, Mel, that a lot of Canadians were prepared to vote against something because they wanted change in the Prime Minister's office, and maybe they weren't giving something to vote for at the scale they needed to win the election, though they did increase their vote share and their seats. But the leadership race is coming, and if you start seeing attacks like this from people like Dimitri Soudis, I mean, what do you think that does to the internal dynamic with the party? I mean, it's not great, but you've kind of got the two things, right? You've got the internal dynamics, you've got reasonable folks like Fred, on one, not necessarily on one side. I don't want to stress that or give. I don't want to give Fred a hard time either with his people. But I think there's the one thing of where is the direction of the party. Your point about this isn't how we win elections. Like that's exactly it. What are you talking about? What people, whether they're partisan or not partisan, what do they hear when you hear this all over the map? Not a whole lot. But the second track is, once you shore up your leadership, you got to go talk to people, and you got to get people to vote for you the next time. And what I saw, at least in my universe, and I've said this before, but my universe is very orange-blue, is the blue part of my universe said, absolutely no way we will vote red for the first time in our lives because we cannot stomach Pierre Poilievre. And every single thing that he's doing like this pushes them further away and reinforces with them that they could not back somebody like Pierre Poilievre. It's interesting. He's weighed in, Fred, on criminal justice issues, on two of them in the past month, essentially saying the RCMP is despicable, they covered up for Trudeau, and Trudeau should be in jail, and then expressing relief that Chris Barber and Tamara Leach, the leaders of the convoy that shut down the city, were being allowed to go home on house arrest, saying they shouldn't have been investigated, they should have gone after rapists and other things. But he thinks he lost Carleton for saying he wanted to cut the size of the civil service, right? It's an interesting, the two poles of that. Let the convoy go free, throw Trudeau in jail is an interesting position to lay out.
Yeah, especially when the Conservatives did very well in the last election on the crime issue. Right? Totally. There are serious crime issues in this country, and there's a strong platform to stand on that the Liberals have not taken it seriously and have not done a good job on it. And that helped us win a ton of seats that we, were not necessarily competitive in.
In Brampton and other places, right? Second generation South Asian voters mad at the Liberals.
We're not, we're still talking crime to your point, but not on the right angle.
Yeah.
And now we're hearing, there is some kind of crime bill coming up, right? That the government's bringing in on bail that could take away that plank from the Conservatives. So we're exposed here. We're exposing ourselves by going into these weird, strange, fringe issues that do not appeal to the vast majority of Canadians.
We believe in law and order, but not totally. It's
Yeah,
weird to follow.
And now the Liberals are bringing in a jail, not bail piece of legislation. So it's amazing how much politics in this country can spin around in the span of a year. We're out of time. Look forward to it every Friday. Greg McEachern, thank you for joining us from your alma mater of St. FX. Fred Delory, also from there, and Melanie Richer, not part of the cult. No. But thank you. It's good to have you all here.